Hey Siri, what's the definition of generosity?
The quality of being kind and generous.
Hey Siri, what is the definition of generous?
Generous means showing a readiness to give more of something, especially money, than is strictly necessary or expected.
Hello everybody. Today it is a good idea to explore the idea of generosity. You heard Siri's definitions about it, so I'm not going to go through that. However, what I am going to go through is two different ideas, two different forms of generosity that is pretty interesting. One of is mutual aid, and the other one is effective altruism. And the best way, in my humble opinion, to explore any idea is to see how they manifest in the real world through a particular scenario. And this scenario is a very serious one, and the one that's still happening as of the recording of this video. It is a situation that is taking place in Ukraine. It's a serious one, and although it all began in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, things went kinetic on the 24th of February 2022. Many people tried to help in many ways, and so let's explore them both, starting off with mutual aid. To explore the idea of mutual aid, I think it's a good idea to go to its origin point. The first mention, or perhaps a conception of the idea of mutual aid, can be found in a book called Mutual Aid that was published in 1907, written by a Russian revolutionist and geographer, Peter Alexeyevich Kropotkin. He's one of the foremost theorists of the anarchist movement. In his book Mutual Aid, Kropotkin aimed to provide anarchism with scientific basis, and hence it's no surprise that his first chapter revolved around exploring the Darwinian concept of survival of the fittest and make his case that cooperation rather than conflict is the chief factor in the evolution of species, and he provided a bunch of examples of this. One of the many examples that Kropotkin uses are bees. These insects are really small, can be easy prey, and let's admit it, would not win against a 1v1 with a bear. However, by them coming together, they are a much more formidable force. This is because by working together, they multiply their individual forces, by resorting to temporary divisions of labor, combined with the fact that any bee can perform any kind of work when required, leads to a high degree of well-being for the bees and also a high degree of safety, and the fact that no isolated animal can challenge the hive without dealing with severe consequences. And this is an example of well-planned mutual assistance. Hence, when like a new swarm of bees are leaving the hive in search of a new one, a significant number of bees would be used to go and explore the nearby vicinity to find a good place to build a hive. Once that's achieved, they would take possession of it, they would clean it, and they would guard it, sometimes even for an entire week, until the entire swarm comes there and settles in there. This level of cooperation is what Kropotkin is trying to emphasize. He does this to challenge the common understanding of Darwin's survival of the fittest, that of the physically strong, fierce individuals being more fit is not an accurate assessment of reality or what Darwin really meant. In Darwinian terms, the fittest are just those who are most likely to survive long enough to reproduce, and it doesn't necessarily have to do anything with physical strength. In fact, the ability of an individual to cooperate with another individual, that of the same or different species, is often a larger mark of fitness than anything else, especially in social species. It is through cooperation that multiple individuals can be more likely to survive compared to how it would be on their own. And there's one quote in this chapter that summarizes everything we have discussed so far. The terrible wars between species and whatever atrocities committed at wartime, mutual aid within community, self-devotion grown into a habit, and very often self-sacrifice for the common welfare are the rule. It is through this quote we can derive the essence of mutual aid and even a definition. Mutual aid is essentially helping those within your community against a common struggle that everyone in said community faces. The part of Darwinism that is emphasized by Western intellectuals even to this day is the terrible war bit, the struggle between and perhaps within species. And if we were to take this into a human context, we speciate ourselves into different identities. These identities may be based on religion, profession, culture, nationality, ethnicity, etc. Struggles of essentially the ideas of difference between these identities is why we fight against each other and bother to support those who are within our identities. In our contemporary context, this pertains to those who you identify with and helping each other out to deal with a common problem that everyone in the community that you identify with are facing. And we can see many examples of this, and Kropotkin's exploration of the evolution of voluntary assistance through primitive tribes, through villages, through medieval institutions like guilds, and of course all the way to his contemporary time with workers' unions and artels, etc. And of course he critiques the things that hinder the progress of mutual aid, and he believes that the future society is going to head towards a direction where everything's going to be more decentralized and stuff. And I will let you be the judge of that based on where in time in the future you are viewing this video. And I believe that the Russian-speaking community in Minnesota has demonstrated mutual aid in relation to the situation that has taken place in Ukraine. I will now roll a news clip that kind of demonstrates this.
In times of need, the Ukrainian community stands together.
We're really grateful for all the support that every organization, every Minnesotan helps us with.
At St. Catherine Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Arden Hills, donations poured in. In high demand, they say, are medical supplies and protective gear.
We can see all the variety of clothes, food, basically everything that people need every day.
There are kind of smaller sizes here.
17-year-old Olesya Sarjinsky sold jewelry from her Ukrainian Etsy line.
I'm trying to stay active, so this is kind of a way I can physically make something and contribute and express my creative side while still helping the cause there.
Many still have loved ones in Ukraine.
Yeah, we'll fight to the end.
Like this man we met outside who showed us a photo of his 63-year-old friend in Kyiv, taking up arms, ready to fight.
He just sent me, where are you?
Across the metro in Eden Prairie, Russian Camp MN held a fundraiser for the children of Ukraine.
And we just really think it's not fair how kids our age are getting treated.
They sold items and wrote letters to refugee children in Poland, sharing their love.
And that they're not alone, and we stand with them, and we want to help them in every way we can.
Even though we speak Russian, we are not with the Russian government. We stand against what Putin is doing. And as a community, friends and neighborhoods here, we do what we can to help those in the war right now.
And the organizer of Russian Camp MN said that the kids come from all over. They have all different types of backgrounds, and she hoped that the event today showed them that they can make a difference regardless of their age or their distance. Jeff?
A lot of places all over the Twin Cities showing their support. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, Kirsten.
We can see that mutual aid is in full swing because an entire community has mobilized itself in order to deal with the problem at hand, which is helping those who are being affected by whatever is going on in Ukraine. First of all, we can see that the entire Ukrainian community has come together, donating all sorts of supplies intended for the refugee camps in Poland at St. Catherine's Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Additionally, there are many individuals, as we've seen with Olesya Sarjinsky, who using their own talents as individuals to aid in a community effort, in this case through her jewelry making skills. And there's a similar story going down in the Russian camp Minnesota, where they also held fundraisers for the children of Ukraine. And not only that, they also wrote letters for the refugee children in Poland, sharing their love and expressing their solidarity, which in itself is community building and community forming, and in its own way a unique form of aid, a psychological sort of aid, you can argue. Another example of mutual aid taking place is through the student body MAC for Ukraine, which is a student support group for Ukraine. As you can see, here is their Instagram page, and during the early days of the war, they have been doing daily updates, keeping the student body informed. But not only that, they have done many food sales and fundraisers for humanitarian relief, and even shown ways to help Ukrainians in their time of hardship in ways that are effective for foreigners. And not only that, they even hosted, in collaboration with the Russian Studies Department in Macalester College, many opportunities for the student body to engage with the situation, and many Zooms with many panels, etc. And here, once again, another form of mutual aid, because here an entire student community has come together to address a bigger problem. The interesting observation I was able to make is that mutual aid, its generosity primarily comes in the form of time. Time spent to not only engage with the community, but also to attempt to make change. We can see with the MAC for Ukraine, their Instagram page is a literal evidence of this. It takes time to make the post, it takes time to do the research, it takes time to host and manage all the logistics that comes up with every fundraising event. And same can be said with the examples that we saw in the news clip. There are a few things to note about mutual aid before we move on. 1. The effectiveness of mutual aid is dependent on the strength of the community. The stronger the community, the more effective and impactful the action of mutual aid is. Additionally, mutual aid is only able to deal with what I would describe as the branches of the problem rather than the root. The root of this entire problem is that there's an active conflict, kinetic conflict going down on Ukrainian soil. And until this is resolved, issues that stem from this conflict will continue. Mutual aid is good to assist those who cannot assist themselves, that are part of the community in which the mutual aid is intended towards. And so it might limit, if not stop, the damages that can be caused from this entire situation in the first place. Now it's time to check out the other side of the coin. The ideas of effective altruism can be traced back to a book called The Most Good You Can Do. And it is written by Australian ethical and political philosopher Peter Singer. And in his book, he tries to look into ways how one can live their entire lives ethically. He explains in his book that effective altruists are people who live modestly and donate a large part of their income. Researching and discussing with others which charities are the most effective, or drawing on research done by other independent evaluators, and choosing careers that they're in which they can earn the most so that they can do more good, and talking to others about giving so that the idea of effective altruism would spread. So essentially, this is a philosophical and social movement which applies evidence and reason to working at the most effective way to improve the world. The most common way of going about this is to maximize the amount of disposable income that you can give away and donate to charity, but not to the point of violating the marginal utility line, which is essentially the point at which, by giving more, one would cause oneself and one's family to lose as much as the recipient of one's aid would gain. Additionally, effective altruists concern themselves on the efficiency of the effectiveness of a singular dollar in stirring up change, and in most cases is going into efforts to save people's lives. And they have also gone as far as to create entire websites such as givewell.org, where they do the research and then they do the calculations and recommend to effective altruists all over the world that this is the best way to spend your money in terms of the amount of lives that could be saved with the same dollar. For example, here in this website, the medicine to prevent malaria has an estimated average cost effectiveness of $5,000 per life saved. Effective altruists concerns themselves in the question of making the world as great and as good of a place as possible, and so issues that are often overlooked grab their attention. An important thing to note about effective altruism is that the idea was conceived during a time where things were relatively peaceful. So how did effective altruists respond to the situation that took place in Ukraine? When exploring Reddit threads about the topic and forums, there was a lot of varied discourse. It is important to keep note that the forums and the Reddit threads I'm looking into focus on the early days of the conflict when it started to get kinetic, because I believe during this tumultuous time, the idea or the challenges that effective altruists faced was at its peak. In the very beginning, there was a lot of talks, especially from effective altruists in Ukraine and in Poland, where they give their opinions on the viability and the reliability of various different charities. Others suggested supporting independent Russian media as a means to deal with the current conflict at hand, as there's a lot of misinformation in Russia regarding what is actually going down on the ground in Ukraine. And so by dealing with this misinformation can stir political change potentially in Russia. Other people cite the fact that there are a lot of other conflicts similar to what is going on in Ukraine that's been happening for a long time, but because there was not a lot of mainstream media coverage, there's not a lot of attention, and because this is being brought to our attention, that we must aid, and that we must not forget these places, and perhaps it is in these places where the actual aid and money sent has a lot more impact. It's also the fact that many Western countries, especially the United States, is sending military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. And so some effective altruists believe that it should stick with the most effective principle, since there's already some aid sent to Ukraine. However, there are even others who say that it is very hard to live strictly based on effective altruist principles because we're humans and we have emotions, and hence it's rational and okay to support Ukraine, but what is the most effective way for you to do so? And ways to go about it have been discussed in various different forums. The most interesting comment I saw, and he made a few points as you can see in his comments. One, the war is too chaotic right now and it's too expensive to make a real difference. And he says that supporting the army, because at the time there were a lot of donations going to the Ukrainian army, would be a wasted effort, since most experts agree that there is no chance whatsoever to win this war. And therefore, it's just prolonging the fight, increasing the suffering. That hasn't aged well, but regardless, he does bring up a point. Can effective altruism be done in a context as chaotic as warfare? In fact, we can get an answer for this from Peter Singer himself. In a New York Times interview with him, the question was asked, in Ukraine, the situation on the ground is changing rapidly, making it difficult to track the allocation of aid. Is effective altruism in the context of war possible? And in summary, he basically said there's no clear way you can give effectively in Ukraine unless you live in the border nations. There have been suggestions to donate to the Red Cross and the Médecins Sans Frontières, who are working in Ukraine for humanitarian purposes, but it is not clear how effective their efforts are going to be. There are better ways of going about helping those in Ukraine. Regardless of Singer's statement, if that is the best way you can do change, then that's the best way you can do change. There are a few interesting parallels between mutual aid and effective altruism that I would quickly like to look into. Effective altruism comes from a time where capitalism is pretty prevalent and is perhaps the main economic doctrine that permeates throughout the world. And mutual aid is coming from perhaps the opposite end of the political spectrum, as it coming from anarchist thought. And there's a bit more communitarianism and communitarian vibes coming from the doctrine. Additionally, effective altruism focuses on money as a means to do change, whereas that the individual can do so, whereas mutual aid, on the other hand, believes in the power of the community to stir change, and that through their time they're able to instir change. These are both different ways of generosity. In the end, both of them do the same thing. They reduce the branches of the problem, but fail to actually address the systemic problem itself. in the context of the conflict in Ukraine, it is literally ending the conflict. And that's going to be really hard to do. The power to end the conflict lies in the states that are involved in the conflict in the first place, whether directly or indirectly. And so they do not address the root problem, but these ideas and these movements are good to reducing the general suffering that one or many people may face during these hard times. And before I wrap up my talk on effective altruism, it is important to note that it is coming from a point of privilege, in the sense that people with money are deciding which efforts are important enough or effective enough to receive aid. Before I end the video, I would like to remind you all that this video is not a political statement. It is just an intellectual exploration of two ideas I wish to share to the world, using a real-life example which pertains to us all and will continue to affect us in many different ways for the decades to come. I used local examples because I understand them better, and with a sensitive topic like this, I felt it was safer for me to deal with examples that were closer to me, since I better understand them and I'm more likely to not do misinformation. But I'm human after all, and I could make mistakes. Do let me know in the comments down below if I did make any. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope that these concepts help you to make the world a better place. And I express solidarity with all those who are suffering from the situation that's happening in Ukraine, and I hope for a just outcome in the end. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, please leave a like, subscribe to stay for more. Happy New Year, since this video was released on the 1st of January 2023. And there's more videos to come for this year, unlike last year where I only uploaded one video, which is a bit embarrassing on my end. I do apologize. Regardless, let me know if there's anything I can improve and what kind of topics you would like me to explore into in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.